You're listening to the Rewatchables 1999 from Luminary Media. I'm your host, Sean Fennessy. I am joined by Jason Gallagher and Andrew Gradadaro. Hello, gentlemen.
Hey, what's up?
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Office Space. Coming up next.
Did you see the memo?
One of these days, I just get this piece of shit.
Did you get that memo?
Excuse me. I believe you have my stapler.
I'll go ahead and make sure you get another copy of that memo.
And when the boss finally crosses that line,
next Friday is Hawaiian Shirt Day.
there's only one thing left to do.
That virus you're always talking about, the one that could rip off the company for a bunch of money. How does it work?
Ron Livingston, Stephen Root, and Jennifer Aniston.
So you're stealing?
No.
Directed by Mike Judge, creator of Beavis and Butthead.
So you're gonna make a lot of money, right?
Yeah.
That's not yours?
Well, it becomes ours.
How is that not stealing?
Office Space.
Yeah. That, of course, means we are talking about the movie Office Space here in 1999 Rewatchables. This movie was written and directed by Mike Judge. It's based on the MTV animated short Milton. And, of course, it was released in 1999, February 19th. It had a budget of $10 million. Wow. It had a box office of $12 million. It's a tough beat. I'm going to run down the cast, and then we're going to start talking about some general reflections on this movie. It stars Ron Livingston, the great Jennifer Aniston, Stephen Root, Gary Cole is the immortal Bill Lumbergh, David Herman, Ajay Naidu, Diedrich Bader, John C. McGinley, Alexandra Wentworth. It is a cavalcade of that guy and that gals all throughout. Jason, let's start with you.
Yeah.
Office Space, you heard we were doing this together and you're like, I relate. I've had some bad jobs in my life.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, for a number of different reasons, it came out like at the perfect time in my life when I was a loser and just had movies for losers, about losers.
Yep.
And it was just something I super related to. And as life went on and I worked bad job after bad job until I found this wonderful job here at theringer.com.
Nicely done.
Thank you. I realized that movie just is smarter and smarter as life continues to go on.
Andrew, let me ask you something.
Yeah.
Jason saw this movie before he had a lot of bad jobs. I don't know how many bad jobs you've had, but anytime you felt like your job sucks, even your job at The Ringer, have you felt like you have assumed the problems that Office Space underlines and made them manifest? Like, is it a chicken or the egg thing here?
Well, I think it's easy to relate, especially when you're sort of in like a doldrum job, to just like fantasize about literally doing nothing, and just to have this like, if I had $1 million, I'd sit around and not waste my time doing anything.
Yeah.
Do you still feel that way? Do you still feel like there's joy in spending $1 million and not moving ever?
Yeah, I think a little bit. Although, I still understand where Peter's coming from when he says that. But I guess my dreams have grown a little larger.
Jason, what about you? You feel like you're self-reflecting the anxieties of work in modern life?
Yeah. Well, sometimes, I've got a great imagination. I can just literally, I have some, so I've spent one time I spent 5 weeks in the hospital and people were worried about hey, is this guy going to be okay? But I was just chilling with my thoughts. And I remember a psychiatrist came in to talk to me because they had to do that. And they were just this guy's fine, just sitting here doing nothing.
Just had that Ron Livingston smile.
So I've got a little bit of that in me where it's just you know what? I can just think and I'll be fine.
Wow, you are kind of a Peter. Are you also into Kung Fu movies?
Not as much. No.
Okay, interesting. I'm going to talk a little bit about the plot of this movie, which I guess is important. As I was watching it, I was like, I don't really remember all this stuff happening.
Yeah.
I don't remember there being a hacking scheme.
Yeah, there's a whole thing.
I don't remember there being a fire. Anyway, here's how it starts. In the Initech office, Peter Gibbons hates his job and the obnoxious division VP, Bill Lumbergh, who has just hired 2 efficiency consultants to downsize the company. His best friends are 2 software engineers, Michael Bolton and Samir Naina-Najjar, that also hate Initech. He believes his girlfriend Anne is cheating on him, but she convinces Peter to visit the hypnotherapist Dr. Swanson. Peter explains how miserable his life is, and Dr. Swanson hypnotizes him, and he enters a state of ecstasy. However, Dr. Swanson dies immediately after giving the hypnotic suggestion to Peter. Peter, in his blissful new state, starts to date the waitress Joanna and changes his attitude, which results in his being promoted by the consultants. When he discovers that Michael and Samir will be downsized, they decide to plant a virus in the banking system to embezzle fractions of cents on each financial operation into Peter's account.
Yeah.
Things go haywire from here.
It kind of sounds badass when you read it like that.
It happened in Superman 3.
It does feel like that. It does feel either like a superhero movie or like, did you ever see Breach with Ryan Phillippe?
Oh, yeah, of course.
You know,
it was long ago, but yes.
Long ago. The sort of like hacker scheme movie was a thing. Hackers, of course, being one of those films. There was some anxiety in the late 90s about our computers and what we could do with them. And this movie seems to be doing that. But I have virtually no relationship to the plot of this movie. This movie is like a joke machine to me.
Yeah, I agree with that. All of the memories, I mean, as we've talked about, like even preparing for this podcast, all the memories come from the lines and the characters, and that's about it. I mean, I don't know. Like you said, I was just like, oh right, we haven't even gotten to the thing. Oh yeah, they do that. Like you know, like the printer smashing scene. Like I will remember till the day I die. But like the actual plot is like, I was like, oh right, I forgot all about that.
It does, Andrew. It does seem plausible. There's a fractions of sense thing where I'm like,
fully.
I get this. I totally buy this.
Yeah, totally. And I mean, just in general, like hating your job is just like something that I assume people can identify with.
Careful.
From one instance, you know, it's just something that everyone sort of experiences once in their life.
Yeah, I think that's definitely true. I think that's part of the reason why this has become such an amazing cult classic. This is truly kind of a bastion of the DVD era.
Yeah.
You know, this movie I felt like was in every dorm room.
Yeah.
I felt like it was on repeat all the time. There was this great story told, we can talk about it a little bit later when we get into half-assed internet research by, there was some reporting around how many DVD sales had happened here and how much money this movie had made on DVD. And the folks at Fox Home Entertainment literally had no idea. And a reporter from a magazine called them and was like, you know, I'm looking at your balance sheet here and it looks like you guys made $6 million on Office Space DVDs. And he was like, is that a fact? Good for us. That's good stuff. They had so forgotten this movie so shortly after it was released. It was such a bomb and such a mismanaged marketing campaign, but it is universal in its way. Everybody's had a bad job.
Well, first off, it's a hard movie to sell, just in general. You know, all of the aesthetics, not a huge name attached other than Jennifer Aniston, all this stuff. But a game that I was playing with my wife when I knew I was going to do this podcast was like, when was the first time? Do you remember the first time you heard about this movie? And it was definitely like through the streets. I do not have any recollection of it being in theaters. I have a recollection of going to Blockbuster and being like hearing about it and being like, so this is it? Like looking at the cover, like vividly remember looking at the cover and being like, I guess this is what people are talking about. And it's just so crazy that I just can't remember it being released in theaters ever.
Yeah, and that poster Mike Judge hated so much. The guy covered in Post-its.
Right.
He had to beg the studio to get Milton on the cover to stand behind the guy covered in Post-its. And also like do Post-its even appear in this film?
I'm sure they're in the background, right?
There's no real plot around Post-its.
Yeah.
Andrew, I assume you didn't see this movie in theaters.
I did not. I was 10 years old when this movie came out. But I think I probably saw it on DVD like 2 years later. And same thing Jason was talking about, where it's like, this is a really funny movie. We got to watch it. And someone just pops it in and then you watch it like 50 more times.
I do feel like it has the same power as a lot of sitcoms do when you're a kid.
Yes.
When you watch a sitcom and you're like, I guess this is just what marriage is like. The man is very angry and his wife is asking him to do something and he's like, oh, not again, honey. And then you're like, oh, that's marriage. Or a family interacts in a certain way where like big sister and little brother are always fighting. And as a kid, you have natural instincts, but you also you respond based on previous things you've seen before.
Yeah.
And I feel like a lot of work-life interaction is like, I'm so burdened by my job and I hate it. And what I want to do is get high and sit on my couch all the time. And I think that there is a wide swath of us here at The Ringer who all were basically still in school when this came out. If you're sub 40, you were still in school.
Definitely.
And in some ways, it dictates your relationship to your workplace.
Well, which goes on to say that like I think it had like a little bit of an effect on especially like the sort of software company like office environment. Like I genuinely believe that like, if you're a company, you don't want to be associated with like that kind of workplace. Like I think it had like an actual effect on Silicon Valley.
Like open floor plans.
That's where they start to be like, well, okay, maybe you don't have to wear a tie. What if you what if you wore like a bomber jacket?
No, I mean, I think that we should be getting into that and what's age the worst. Because in some way, there are some office places that are like this. My wife's reaction when we were watching it too is like she works in a sort of a business environment that is akin to this, but just wears jeans every day.
Yeah.
And that's okay. And everybody is in like a pantsuit or a bad shirt and tie from I don't know, Macy's probably. My pal Roger Ebert, who is routinely accosted on this podcast by Bill Simmons, gave this movie 3 out of 4 stars. This is what he wrote about Mike Judge. He treats his characters a little like cartoon creatures. That works. Nuances of behavior are not necessary because in the cubicle world, every personality trait is magnified and the captives stagger forth like grotesques. Super accurate.
Yeah.
Andrew and Jason, do you guys feel like everyone that you work with is a creature and that you have a keen sense of how they operate in the world?
I guess it's like you only see a certain side of someone. And so you're seeing 30% of someone's personality. So you latch onto those things and then amplify them to build a full person,
Totally. To sort of echo what Andrew's saying, it was like, you know when you work with someone and then you like for the first time go get drinks with them and you're just like, oh my God, this person's real. This person's not anything like, what I know. And so I think I definitely can relate to that, at this.
Is this about me and you, Jason?
Yeah, definitely. I had drinks with you one time and I was like, wow, not a dick. Just kidding.
That's true. No, that's honestly entirely accurate. It's just get some booze in me and things change. Should we go to the categories, guys? Any final reflections on what this movie meant to you, means to the culture at large? I think we'll talk more about Mike Judge as we go forward.
Yeah, I think it's just worth pointing out, like in 1999, how different this movie is from other comedies that came out. Like, I mean, Austin Powers' The Spy Who Shagged Me is the highest grossing comedy of 99. And to put those two movies side by side is really funny. I think Mike Judge sort of like almost ushered in a new version of comedy with this movie. And I think things sort of slid towards him as the years went on.
Yeah, I would say it's not a subtle movie per se, but waged against The Spy Who Shagged Me, it definitely seems pretty subtle.
Right.
And it has a surprising amount of plot and characterization. It's not just a series of sketches slung together. And it doesn't have, it's like sophomoric, but it's not juvenile.
Yeah.
It's not American Pie.
No.
I'm trying to think of
my
the other shows
parents were
we've
not
done here.
worried about me watching Office Space.
Exactly.
And, yeah, I mean, I think for me, like sort of my general reflections is that this came at a time where it was like literally the ultimate rewatchable because I was entering a teenage phase of my life and what was on syndication at the time was like Home Improvement. And it's just like, if you're entering an age where you're trying to like, expand your comedic senses and things like that. And then this movie comes on and Comedy Central is like literally airing it like every Friday and Saturday night.
It was on TV
it was
the time.
all the time. And it was just like, I'm going to choose to do this rather than do whatever. And yeah, it to me, it was the ultimate rewatchable for me personally.
It's definitely high on my list. Let's do most rewatchable scene. That's our first category. I've got a bunch of I actually only have a handful of recommendations. I would say, as we were discussing this movie right before we started, it's not so much a movie as it is a series of funny memories.
Yes.
The way that it exists in our minds. It's a lot of bits. It's a lot of lines. But I'll throw out some candidates. The first is The Morning Commute. The commute to Inateck.
Incredible.
Which is more montage than it is scene. But you've got the changing lanes hell, which I think almost every
if
person
you can't relate to it, then you're making billions or something.
It's just you fly, you go to work in a helicopter. Yeah, exactly. Which I think is I think it's the first time I'd ever seen that. The sort of like I've changed lanes, and as soon as I get into the next lane, the car in front of me has come to a full stop, and then the cars to my right are blowing right past me.
It's changed the way I drive. I literally will never do that because I'm like, you know what? If the Office Space has taught me anything, it's not going to work. You stay in this lane. To the point where sometimes my wife will be like, "Are you really going to stay in this lane?" And I'm like, "Yeah, you know what? I've lived this life too long."
Then we see, of course, the old man with the walker beating Peter to work. Incredible visual cue there.
Yeah.
I think as soon as you see that too, you realize what kind of movie this is going to be. And you've got this very antic sort of mariachi soundtrack at the beginning of the film. Then we see Michael Bolton rapping along to Scarface, which I think he's rapping to No Tears, one of my favorite Scarface songs, quite vividly until somebody approaches his car and then he locks the door and begins to rap a little bit more quietly.
Yeah.
Then we see Bill Lumbergh pull into his parking space, and his license plate says "My Porsche." Just not a win for
Still
Bill.
funny to me.
I love that scene. It thrusts you right into the tone of the movie. It's perfect. Another one comes shortly thereafter. It's TPS Reports.
TPS Reports.
Is TPS Reports the most sort of viable, long-lasting bit from the movie in your mind?
It's sort of weird because it's not the first thing that comes to my mind when you say Office Space, but it is the thing that I probably appreciate the most about the movie. I don't know if that makes any sense whatsoever, but I definitely quoted Lumbergh the most out of anybody. That scene, like all of that stuff.
How much Lumbergh should we be doing on this podcast?
So much. I mean, like
Hey, Peter, what's happening?
What's happening? Yeah. I mean, like it's such a perfect, like if you weren't in from the traffic scene at that point, then you had to, like, you were definitely in by Lumbergh for sure.
Andrew, did you know that TPS reports are a real thing?
I did not.
Yeah. I read that.
Mike Judge knows of which he speaks. Another scene, worst day of my life, when he goes to the hypnotherapist and he starts explaining how he's feeling.
So good.
Which, Craig, let's hear a little bit of that right now.
So I was sitting in my cubicle today and I realized ever since I started working, every single day of my life has been worse than the day before it. So that means that every single day that you see me, that's on the worst day of my life.
This made me laugh the hardest rewatching it again.
The dialogue, man.
He's so
good.
despairing, and it's so cleverly written. And, we're talking about Mike Judge, and if you look at the things that Mike Judge does after this, if you look at Idiocracy, if you look at Extract, if you look at Silicon Valley, he has this way of writing like schnook characters, guys who are so beaten down by the world. And this is kind of the perfect evocation of it. And it leads to this major plot point, which is pretty ridiculous as plot points go.
Yeah.
It's like, so...
And when does it wear off? Yeah, I don't know.
Have you, either of you got... Andrew, have you been hypnotized before?
Never. No.
Jason, no?
No. Just a hard no.
I haven't either. Has someone tried to hypnotize you in the past?
No.
Do you know if this is how the science of hypnotherapy works, where if someone hypnotizes you and dies, you are trapped in a permanent state?
Funnily enough, I'm not an expert in this category here.
Oh, interesting.
And so
you should probably leave the podcast.
Yeah,
then.
exactly. If you want to replace me with somebody else, that's fine. But I have no clue.
Next most rewatchable scene, damn, it feels good to be a gangster montage.
Yep.
Andrew, what was your level of familiarity with the Texas rap stylings of the Ghetto Boys prior to this film?
I'm going to say Office Space is wholly responsible for introducing me to this, and I'm very happy that it did.
Yeah, this scene is really great. Also sort of wordless montage style where he deconstructs his desk, he fishes and then brings the fish into the office and guts and cleans the fish.
Yeah.
There's scenes of him watching Kung Fu and just sort of attempting to live the life that he's always wanted to live. And it's going well. I got to say, I may be stepping on picking nits here, but Jason, if you did some of these things in the office, if you went fishing in the middle of the morning and then came in and brought a smelly fish into the office and you started gutting it and then didn't do any work for like 4 days, I would notice.
Would you?
Yeah, I would.
Okay, fine.
I would notice and I'd be like, hey, and I'd slack you and I'd say, hey, can you come by my office? I got to ask you about something.
That's fine. I mean, it's a big place we work. There are ways to walk to work around this.
But there are no rivers. There are no active.
There are no rivers.
No active rivers.
I live next to the LA River. There are no fish in that.
Since
river.
Andrew and I don't work in the same office, Andrew actually could get away with this.
Probably.
I do it all the time.
Next most rewatchable scene. Jason, you already mentioned it. I think the smashing the copy machine.
Yeah.
What the
Unreal.
PC load letter? What the fuck does that mean?
Yeah.
Of course, one of the more iconic lines from this movie. And then I just wrote down all things Drew.
Yep.
Drew has 2 scenes in the movie.
Yeah.
They're
True.
both 2 of my favorite scenes in movie history.
Yeah.
The first brings us thinking about showing her my O face.
The O face.
Mm-hmm.
Will you be doing any Drew on this podcast, Jason?
I was gonna.
You're a father, so just
Yeah, I got to chill out.
Okay.
But the Drew was an icon. If they sold Drew posters at Spencer's Gifts, I probably would have bought them. I loved that dude.
what happened to that guy? Where is that guy? Andrew, you worked on a story about Drew. What happened to Drew?
Drew, just like for some behind the scenes as to how that story came together, there was some quotes from Greg Pitts, the actor, that we had to just straight up cut because they were they were borderline offensive. So
How fascinating.
He seems to be still milking this persona, honestly.
Good for him.
So this was more documentary for Greg Pitts than performance. The second Drew scene, of course, is Lumberg fucked her.
Yeah.
Which is also, imagine one of your colleagues
Yeah.
saying that to you at a cookout
Uh-huh.
about someone that you were romantically intimate with.
That'd be being married for 9 years. That would be pretty wild,
Pretty tough.
to say the least.
You guys have any other nominees for most rewatchable scene?
I mean, there's still like the stapler scene. I mean, there's still that. I don't know if that counts as a line or a scene. But that being the first image that pops in my head when it feels weird to not mention Milton in some way, shape, or form when you're talking about scenes, just because to me, he's just the image of this movie in a lot of ways. I mean, when you go to Apple Movies, there's just like this big picture of Milton still.
Andrew,
That would be the only
where do
thing.
you stand on Milton?
I'm a fan. I think Stephen Root, it's one of it's maybe his most iconic performance. And it has kind of like aged and like lived on. I think you could say something about a stapler to anyone and they would finish it.
Despite the fact that I kind of have it in the what's aged the worst, in a weird, but not. I don't know. I wanted to have a discussion about Milton because to me he's just like a fascinating thing that like I don't think could be the focal point of a movie in 2019, but also has stood the test of time. He's just an interesting thing to me.
Who would you say is the Ringer's Milton? You can say it right now.
Oh, right this second.
Yeah.
Chris Ryan for sure.
I agree. I got to be honest. I'm probably betraying my taste because I never really got Milton. I never really thought it was that funny. I never really thought. I remember watching the shorts.
Yeah.
These shorts were on MTV and they were also on another network. I can't recall which one. This is around the time of Liquid Television and Beavis and Butthead. Of course, Mike Judge's first breakthrough. And it was the bit was the same. It was just an animated version of this figure obsessed with his swing line stapler.
Yeah.
And kind of nebbishy and a little bit incomprehensible.
Yeah.
Is it that you recognize this character in the wild, or it's just a funny thing that there's somebody who's this strange in an office setting?
That's a really good question because I don't remember like lolling that much at Milton, but having like a affinity for Milton. I loved him. He was a character. Yeah. And when he, eventually burns the place down, which is not condoning or endorsing in any way, shape, or form, but you were definitely like, hell yeah, Milton. He's just
Were you?
A little. He saves the day.
We'll be noting that in your file.
He
Jason.
saves the day. Anyways, so yeah, I don't know. He's a complicated character. He's not the funniest, like you said, but he is just this sort of, I don't know. He's the thing that I remember first about this movie.
I also really appreciate the bit of them just forcing him to move his desk further and further away from the center of the office.
That is good. I agree. Andrew, any other rewatchable scenes you want to flag?
I just want to make sure we give proper respect to Drew telling the Smokowski car accident scene.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
which is comes right after O-Face. But it's just the way that it's shot, first of all, like with the garage closing as the car is backing up, and then the guy just gets walloped by a truck. And then just the fact that Drew is telling it as if it's like the funniest thing to ever happen. And it cuts back to everyone else and they're horrified. It's like, that's just a perfect encapsulation of Drew as a character.
Drew is a legend. So what's your pick for most rewatchable scene, guys? Andrew, what about you'll go first?
Yeah, it's the printer. Like, it's just a flawless scene. And like, it's filmed so well. The song is perfect. It's just so fucking funny when he's I think Michael Bolton is just literally punching the printer.
Has to be dragged away from it.
It's just so incredible.
I remember thinking that why aren't his knuckles bleeding? That would fucking hurt. But I was gonna say the printer. I think I'm just gonna switch my answer to the TPS reports. They really, that scene just really matters to me. The first time you see Lumbergh, I mean, he just is the ultimate sort of like villainous boss with the suspenders, the thick suspenders, the type of shirt he was wearing, the way he holds his coffee, the glasses, everything about him when you see him was perfect. And then he spoke and you're just like, oh my God.
Hello, Peter. What's happening? We have sort of a problem here. Yeah, you apparently didn't put one of the new cover sheets on your TPS reports.
Oh, yeah. I'm sorry about that. I forgot.
Yeah. You see, we're putting the cover sheets on all TPS reports now before they go out. Did you see the memo about this?
Yeah. I'll never forget that. That is the scene that I just appreciate the most.
It's the first time I'd come across Gary Cole, who went on to be in Talladega Nights and had a long run on Veep, and really one of the best that guy actors of the last 20 years. But he's just amazing in this. Let's do What's Age the Best. I wrote down a few. One of them was already mentioned: the hacking plot in Superman 3, which I feel like is like still legible, credible. I could see fractions of sense stolen from your software company. Craig is smiling at me.
That's what Bobby and I are doing right now.
Right,
as
we speak.
This will be the last podcast The Ringer publishes, thanks to Bobby and Craig. I also wrote down the soundtrack, which, as I said, I think it introduced a lot of people to a lot of stuff like this. There's that very strange Cannabis song, Take This J.O.B. and Shove It, something along those lines, on the closing credits.
Yeah.
I think the idea of downsizing, as sort of gruesome as it is really pervasive, not just in our industry, but in all industries around the world. And the way that it's done, this sort of like soft diplomacy, nobody ever really says what they mean management style is very real. Jason knowingly trying not to make eye contact with me right now, sounding like Lumbergh. And of course, I wrote down Mike Judge's career in comedy. His whole style, I think, is, there's only a handful of people who were hugely influential in comedy during this time. You've probably got Will Ferrell and Adam McKay. You've probably got the South Park guys.
Yeah.
I think to a lesser extent, somebody like Seth MacFarlane. There's this very small club that I think changed the tonality of comedy over the last 2 decades. I would put Mike Judge really like in the top 3 or 4 of that group. Jason, you're a comedy guy. What do you...
Wow.
No? Is that an insult?
That's the worst.
You're an improv genius.
There you go.
Anybody else that you can see kind of in that hierarchy, that Hall of Fame?
Yeah, I just because of the space that I work in, I find Andy Samberg to be pretty influential just because of what he did for the digital space and things like that. Yeah. But what you're saying about Mike Judge is definitely accurate. It's something that it's one of those in hindsight things you look back and you're like, oh my God, this guy was just throwing heaters and is still throwing heaters. It's crazy.
Pretty crazy.
Yeah, it's really wild. So am I supposed to give you my answer now to the question?
No, I want to know if Andrew thinks there are any other comedy icons.
Okay.
Did we said Apatow, right?
We didn't, but definitely Judd Apatow, no question.
Yeah. He's probably the only one that hasn't been mentioned yet that is in the last 20 years.
Yeah, and then I would also say probably the...
Kevin James.
That's where I was going. Kevin James. I would say that Paul Blart comes in right behind this as most rewatchable comedy of the last 20 years. What do you say?
Yeah, totally. 100%.
Okay. Andrew, what's Age the Best?
you sort of mentioned downsizing, but I think also this sort of like the weight of having a career, I guess, and sort of like, I think it's sort of accelerated, and we're only now kind of taking a step back, being like, maybe turning your entire life into your job isn't the right thing to do. I think within the last decade, we've sort of like had a rise and fall of like how much time you should be devoting to your job. And I think these sort of questions that Office Space brought up are kind of still around today, like as people enter the workforce.
Jason, what about you? What's aged the best?
Definitely for me, Mike Judge. I mean, I when we're doing these categories, you sort of fill out what you think, and I tangentially sort of wrote down the first 10 minutes just to, but that's largely because of Mike Judge, obviously, and he's just we've already sort of discussed it. He's just a sort of a genius, and especially at this time when it was just like he was just doing animated stuff, a little because of the perception of animation and comedy and all this stuff. He was a little like, this is a movie that my dad loves, and he would never touch King of the Hill or Beavis and Butthead with a 10-foot pole. It's just cartoons.
Just because they're animated.
They're animated. Shout out Chris Ryan. But Office Space he loves. For him to be able to have this movie didn't immediately, dunk, but the dunk popped up, bounced around the rim, and then eventually went in.
He was sort of a Kawhi 4-bouncer.
There you go. And yeah, so shout out Mike Judge. I definitely think his comedy has aged the best. So
the next two categories are What's Aged the Worst and the 1999 award for the most 1999 thing. I tend to think that these two awards have a lot of crossover. I'm going to throw some candidates your way for What's Aged the Worst. The technology. There's a lot of paper in this movie. This kind of goes part and parcel with the TPS reports and memos. You remember when did you guys ever have a job where they'd hand you a memo in paper?
Yes.
Sounds rough.
That was dark.
It sucked so bad.
That was super weird.
Everything done on paper. Just a very quick thing. When I was looking for jobs like this, my dad used to just drop me off in like strip malls in a suit and be like, all right, pick you up in an hour and a half. And I would be like, Dad, everything's online. Like you do, this was like at that time where things were getting to be online. And it was just like, they're not gonna, and he's just like, I don't care. You ask for a physical resume. And if they don't have it, you ask to see the manager, you shake his hand. Yeah, it was great.
I'll tell you a quick story.
Yeah.
One summer when I was a teenager, I worked for Publishers Clearinghouse. Do you remember Publishers Clearinghouse?
Yeah.
Andrew, remember this?
Is that the big checks?
That was the big
checks. The balloons, right?
Yes.
Yes.
I don't even really understand the nature of their business model. I think it was some sort of subscription
we should
service.
Look into this.
Yeah. It does feel like maybe there were some crooks behind this thing. But I think it was through a temp agency. I was just looking to work when I was 19.
Yeah.
I've had myriad strange jobs in my life leading up to this glorious moment where we're making this podcast the best job I could ever have. And when I was doing this job, it was Publishers Clearinghouse, so it was all by mail.
Yeah.
It was all paper. The whole business was on paper. Now, they were choosing people to win these enormous prizes sort of by random action through paper.
Yeah.
And so all day, I would just open envelopes, look at submissions, and then put them in a file that was then shredded. Wow. And I was just opening envelopes for hours a day. I had literally dozens of paper cuts on my hands.
Yeah.
It was and you had those little sponges that you would touch to sort of like
get
the touch so you could open something or. So
you weren't like licking your fingers, I guess? Is that what
they don't want you licking the fingers and then opening the envelope. That's not ideal.
That's probably right.
Like a top 6 worst job you can do in an office in the history of time. No offense to Publishers Clearinghouse. Who knows what they're doing now? They still giving out checks?
Sure.
I don't really know.
It's just email now.
Oh, that's way less exciting. It's just all going to your spam folder. What's aged the worst? Hawaiian Shirt Day?
Nah, I'm into it.
You like it?
Yeah, we should. I mean, I'm into it. Whatever.
Andrew, how many Hawaiian shirts you own?
0.
I have one. I did not go to Hawaii, but I went to Turks and Caicos and I bought a shirt. And I look great in it. I'll show it to you. I'll show you a picture after.
Humble bragging that you've been to Turks and Caicos during an Office Space podcast. One of the all-time flexes I've ever heard in my life.
It's just, burnt down a building in my previous job and then got the cash, baby.
Well, my wife was reflecting that Hawaiian Shirt Day hasn't aged that well because the idea of having a fun day to do something creative with your clothing
Yeah.
is kind of over. It's
Yeah,
actually weird.
It's too bad, though. I really like that type of thing. I really do. I think it's fun.
Okay, so what do you want to do here at The Ringer?
I've talked about it with colleagues before, like where it's just like,
Have you?
Yeah.
Okay.
And the video department is this wild place, man. Well, we've talked about sort of going Hot Topic Day. That was one that was discussed.
It's a hard pass for me. Andrew, any nominations for a styling day of some kind for you?
Let's
Cowboy day,
let's
maybe?
just inverse it, and everyone has to wear the nicest suits.
Yes.
Oh, that's a good idea.
I have always wanted to do this. Only Danny Chow has ever agreed to participate in this with
That's
me,
the
unfortunately.
best. Dressing up is so
Okay,
fun.
so we'll have prom day.
Yes.
Okay. Ringer prom coming soon, 2019. I wrote down Milton's stapler as What's Age the Worst. Not the scene itself, but just having a stapler. You think, has the stapler business taken a big hit? Do we know?
Probably because
I
of,
assume,
because
yeah.
of your paper conversation we just had.
Yeah.
In the sense that seems wasteful.
Tough beat there.
2050.
Just tchotchkes and TGI Fridays as a restaurant style.
Yeah, this sucked for me. As I don't know if you know this, Andrew, but I was birthed out of
a TGI Fridays.
I mean, my parents met at TGI Fridays. My dad was the manager, and my mom was a waitress, and they met, and it was beautiful. And I was raised in the restaurant chain business. He later moved on to manage Chili's.
You can't say I was birthed out of this.
I was birthed out of it. I'm sorry, you can't handle the reality of it all. But I used to literally
That's not sanitary. People eat in that restaurant.
But I would literally go there all the time, and it's so crazy that watching this movie just like literally made me feel like weirdly like nostalgic for the sort of stylings of a TGI Fridays. Like I would definitely, if a TGI Fridays opened like an old school TGI Fridays, I would desperately want to go just for the aesthetic of like the weird sort of gold railings and then it was just so bizarre, and the shirts and the flair and all that stuff. I kind of have a soft spot for it.
Andrew, I know growing up in upstate New York, you experienced your handful of franchise restaurants like this.
Oh yeah, every Friday night it was like, are we going to Applebee's or TGI Fridays
Hell
or Chili's?
yeah, brother.
What's your power rankings?
I think I would go TGI Fridays 1,
Mm-hmm.
Chili's 2, Applebee's 3, Ruby Tuesdays like far down the list.
Okay, two things about this. One, when I was growing up, Applebee's buy one, get the next free appetizers on Friday nights. Clutch.
Oh, yeah.
Game changer.
Clutch.
Yeah.
Likewise, Ruby Tuesdays, buy one, get one free drinks afternoons.
But here's the thing. You guys are really overlooking the Olive Garden, which has unlimited breadsticks and when you get the unlimited breadsticks and salad, it's like really just kind of incredible. And
Great point.
Yeah.
This is Spawn for Olive Garden.
That's right. I follow them on Twitter and actively have a nice back and forth with them sometimes.
I don't know what to do with that.
But it's Chili's 1. It's Chili's 1. No one asked, but I'm just telling you, it's Chili's number 1.
One more for What's Age the Worst.
Yeah.
Just the internet. Just this version of the internet.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there's something, you can see the sort of MS-DOS prompt at the beginning of the movie sitting on Peter's screen, and just the way that we could hack into something.
Yeah.
It just feels very different. It actually feels harder to hack now than it did back then because everything was so primitive and nobody knew anything. But also, boy, I don't miss the days of having to wait for anything on the internet. That was like a real thing. You had to wait several minutes to download one photo.
It was very frustrating.
It's bizarre.
It was very frustrating. It was, especially when you're chatting with your friends and then somebody needs to get on the phone and it's just like, what the hell is this? Kind of can't imagine living in that world. I mean, it's like literally unimaginable.
It would make literally what we do for our work virtually impossible. I think even the prospect of somebody like Andrew working in New York while we were in Los Angeles would be really hard.
NBA Desktop would be a tough beat.
Tough beat. It'd be literally NBA Desktop. It'd be NBA TPS report.
Yeah.
Andrew, what's your vote? What's Age the Worst? Any other nominees too?
No, I think the technology, the task bars, and just like the concept of turning off your computer, but then sitting there for 5 extra minutes while it actually turns off.
Yeah.
It's just like the worst memory I have in my life. Very triggering stuff. So I would say that.
Jason, what about you?
I've got 2 nominees that I would like to put forth.
Please.
One, There's a couple like I'm going to come in and shoot up the office jokes
yes.
were sort of fine back then.
Not ideal.
Not great now.
No.
But that's just the reality of the world. And the second one is when Peter gets hypnotized and then starts to be like YOLO, he starts going with this sort of baggy jeans flip-flops combo. And that's just like, I remember doing that. I did that. I had that styling as well. And that's definitely not aged very well. So I'm just gonna, my curveball is that the flip-flops with the baggy jeans is really tough beat. I cannot imagine ever doing that ever again for the rest of my life.
Yeah, I think it's safe to say that on virtually every episode of The Rewatchables 1999, we will be saying the clothes these people are wearing.
Yeah.
The late 90s is a complex style moment, I
But
would
it did
say.
okay. It did okay otherwise.
Yeah. You loved the flair.
I mean, I'm just saying that the flair was a product of the company. It's fine, whatever. But the personal choice of going flip-flops, I love but even flip-flops in general, but then doing it with jeans is like wild to me. It's very Hootie.
It is very Hootie.
Yeah.
I wish this were a Hootie pod. The 1999 award for the most 1999 thing, I think that there's like, as I said, a lot of crossover. Even the DVD menu when I was rewatching this movie and those taskbars that Andrew was talking about and the way that sort of internet interface looked is a funny bit, but now is a nostalgia piece and is not an evocation of what it's actually like to be on the internet.
Right.
And the TPS reports and cover letters and memos and all of those things. Craig has helpfully given us, I think, the winner of this category, though I'll let you guys be the deciders here. The phrase, what would you do if you had $1 million? Which, of course, is just not as much money in 2019.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Fair.
That's really good.
You could maybe put a down payment on a nice house and then get a pool.
What would you do with $1 million?
You know, $1 million in 1999.
Yeah, I'd put it to work.
Yes. Yes. You just put your kid through private school.
Yeah, there you go.
Any other nominees for 1999 thing?
I've got one.
Okay.
And it is, I don't know how appropriate it is, but it's Lawrence related. And it's him knocking on the thing to be like, there's a girl on TV. And again, I was a teenager. But when that type of thing happened, you told your friends about it and you know what I mean?
Yes.
And that was just at the time, that's what it was. It was a rare thing. Bill had a podcast with House at one point and they were kind of jokingly being like, dude, it's 20, because he was saying there's not enough, as much nudity on Game of Thrones. And he was like, I like to be surprised these days. It's kind of that. It kind of speaks to that where it's like, so that's a very 1999 thing specific to 1999.
Yes. I think discovering a naked woman on television, especially as a teenager, it had a certain appeal. Andrew, would you agree?
Yeah, that's a really good one, Jason.
Yeah, thanks, guys.
Good job, you pervert. Let's do casting what ifs.
Sure.
The studio wanted Matt Damon as Peter, but
Wild.
Mike Judge felt the role should not have, quote, star energy.
Yeah.
Vince Vaughn and Owen Wilson auditioned for the role of Lawrence, while Kate Hudson was considered to play Joanna.
Crazy.
I gotta say, Ron Livingston is perfect in this movie.
Yes.
And even though he is not the biggest star, and I think Matt Damon would be fine. It's funny that Matt Damon did later appear in a movie called Downsizing.
Yeah.
Ron Livingston is perfect as the downtrodden, affectless dude, and also perfect as the breezy and come what may dude. I can't see. Is there anybody else you would want to see in this role, Andrew?
I don't think so. I think like his overall like blankness is just like perfect for this.
Yeah, I agree. Artie Lang was considered for the role of Milton.
Oh, wow. That'd have been something else.
That would have aged bad.
That's really hard to imagine.
Here's a little bit about Jen Aniston, who we have not talked about at all. This is Jennifer Aniston really in the thrum of Friends mania. She was cast to accommodate Fox's desire to have a recognizable star in the film, although they were concerned that her part was so small. The subplot involving her battle with her boss over her flair was added as a result, and she was written out of the sex dream sequence, along with dialogue indicating she had actually slept with Lumbergh. However, she had liked the script since she was not getting many other films like that at this point, and she'd gone to the same high school as David Herman.
Oh.
As I said, Kate Hudson was also considered for the part. Andrew, I seem to recall there being a lot of bits about David Herman being such a superlative actor in some of the Office Space oral histories and like the relationship that people had to him. Does that sound familiar?
Yeah, and I think Judge in the oral history said like I wrote this thinking of David Herman.
Yeah, I read that too.
It's so strange. I mean, I'm sure we'll get to him a little bit later, but David Herman plays Michael Bolton. He's one of the funniest parts of this movie.
Yeah.
He is, in his way, I suppose, a great actor. I had only really known him from Mad TV prior to this, a show that he hated being on, apparently, and worked very hard to get off of.
It's great.
In fact, he, in his final season on the show, in an effort to be booted from the show, screamed his lines during every telecast.
Iconic.
Which is just amazing.
Oh, that's awesome.
If either of you guys start screaming any of your lines in this podcast, I'll know you want to go.
What a move.
The other one here for casting what ifs is John C. McGinley auditioned for Lumbergh, but was ultimately cast as Slidell.
It's probably a good move.
Big fan of what McGinley's doing in this movie.
Yeah.
Which leads us to the Dion Waiters Award.
Everyone?
This award, for those of you who are not familiar, is for the greatest heat check in the movie, the person doing the most with the least amount of time. I wrote down McGinley.
It's very good.
I love his... There's something about phrasing in this movie, the way that everyone says their lines of dialogue. As funny as the lines of dialogue are, done differently. I think this is true for Samir's character. I think this is true for Michael Bolton.
Yep.
I think this is true even for Jennifer Aniston's character. Certainly true for Lawrence. But McGinley, particularly, what would you say you do here?
I sent that GIF like within the last 48 hours.
That is perfection.
Yeah.
And so he is my vote, but I'm open-minded about other candidates. Andrew, any candidates for the Dion Waiters Award?
I feel it has to be Drew, right?
Yeah, dude. Where are you?
It's true.
It's true.
It's true.
I mean, he does so much with so little.
You're right.
It's insane. it's like the hottest heat check I've ever seen.
I'm thinking I might take that new chick from logistics. Things go well, I might be showing her my O face. Oh. You know what I'm talking about. Oh. Yeah.
Okay. I had to cape for McGinley for one hot minute, but
For sure. And it speaks to the like, it feels like everybody is a little bit of a Dion Waiters. Like this is a team with Dion Waiters, which makes me believe that there's a place in the NBA for actual Dion Waiters.
But this is like a 23-win team if you've got 5 Dion Waiters on the court.
Sure, but cult classic.
Real fun to watch.
Yeah, real fun to watch. No, the John C. McGinley is, like I said, literally everybody, even the dude, the guy who gets injured. What's his name?
Smokowski.
Okay. Yeah.
Injured? That's one way of describing attempting suicide and then getting hit by a truck.
Yeah,
he stubbed his toe.
That dude's like hilarious.
He's very funny.
He's really funny, and he's really earnest. Anyways.
Let's save him for the Saul Rubinek, or excuse me, for the Joey Pants Award.
Okay,
for the sort of that guy award.
Sure.
Half-assed internet research. I've got a lot here.
Yeah.
Feel free to interject your feelings anytime I say something that is interesting to you.
Okay.
The first one, and I don't know if this struck you guys or if you read this in high school. I certainly did. This film is loosely based upon Herman Melville's short story Bartleby the Scrivener.
What?
Sure.
Have you read Bartleby the Scrivener?
No.
I have.
So there's a very famous line that Bartleby, the character, repeats throughout the story. I believe it's, I would prefer not to. It's when he is asked to do something.
Okay.
Yes.
And it's about an obstinate person who wants to live the life that they want to live, but that doesn't have a lot of interiority. I have a hard time remembering this story, but I do remember I would prefer not to. Andrew, is this ringing a bell of any kind?
That sounds pretty much, yeah, you pretty much seem to have it.
I love when something very dumb is based on something very important seeming.
Okay.
That's a great comic bit. As of 2003, this movie had sold 2.6 million copies on VHS and DVD. That is a lot for those of you listening out there. The iconic red stapler coveted by Milton was created for the film by the prop department. They needed a bright enough color to be seen on film and chose red. After the film was released, Swingline began to receive requests from customers for red staplers. Having stopped offering red several years before, they made the decision to start offering the color once more.
Wow.
That is truly cultural power. The PC load letter scene was not scripted. David Herman had more lines to say to Ron Livingston, but was interrupted by the photocopier jamming and didn't understand what it meant. That's an all-time great
awesome.
improv.
That is awesome.
That's a terrific improv. Milton was actually based on an old coworker that Mike Judge worked with during his days as an engineer. One day, Judge went to the man and asked him how he was doing, and the worker began talking about how he was going to quit his job because he was forced to move his desk around too many times.
Wow.
Notable. You've actually moved your desk around several times, as I recall.
I don't believe I have a desk at this point.
That's a good point. Andrew, you've basically been in one place since you started working here.
Yeah, I'm comfy.
Mike Judge has said more people talked to him about this movie than any project he has ever worked on. Judge was offered a chance to make a sequel, Office Space 2, Still Renting, but said that he had been through enough anguish over the first one that he didn't want to put himself through the experience again. Do you guys lament Office Space 2, Still Renting, the fact that we don't have that?
I remember thinking like, man, I would love to see an Office Space now, but it being about like a tech company and things, it's Silicon Valley basically in a lot of ways.
We did kind of get it.
Yeah. When I was thinking about this movie, I was like, man, it seemed like it changed Silicon Valley in the way it wanted to be perceived, but I almost feel like it made it worse. And now we're getting that commentary with Silicon Valley, where it's just like this sort of desire to not be that. And so it's the antithesis of that is like a bunch of old dudes being like, how do you do, fellow kids? And just trying to be hip and cool constantly. I mean, a couple of jobs ago, I worked a lot with a large tech company, and it was a lot of cubicles, but it was also like, we don't call it that. Like we call it like, you know, and it's just guys driving around on those things that roll. You know what I mean? Those automatic rolly things. They're like scooters. They're not scooter, but they don't have the hands. So it's just on your feet. What are those called?
Hoverboards.
Yeah, they're like, yeah, literally that.
Jeez, it's bleak.
Yeah, and it's like we got a ping pong table in the break room. What do you think of that?
Should we get a ping pong table in the break room?
No.
I got to say, I'm glad that we're not one of those
I'm
companies.
so glad too.
One of the promotions for this film invited people in certain cities to watch and participate in the bashing of office equipment. Oh. There was also an internet campaign that linked to a website where people could expose their bad bosses. That's not ideal.
Wow.
That's terrible.
Where?
Not ideal. Please don't relaunch that. Thank you very much. As of October 2018, the term ass clown was officially entered in the Webster's Dictionary, crediting writer Mike Judge for first using it in Office Space. Jason, you were just saying at the top of this show, right before we started recording, I don't know if these things invented something or if they just adopted it and popularized it. Yeah. In this case, if Mike Judge's lasting comic contribution to society is ass clown,
that's great.
Good on him.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, at least your name isn't Michael Bolton.
You know, there's nothing wrong with that name.
There was nothing wrong with it until I was about 12 years old and that no-talent ass clown became famous and started winning Grammys.
I mean, what if one can only hope to leave such a legacy behind?
I love it. When Peter is in the meeting room, on the whiteboard behind him, there is a complicated flowchart titled Planning to Plan. You guys noticed that?
I did. Yeah, I saw that.
That's a really good one. In one memorable scene, Michael Bolton laments having the same name as the singer, calling him a no-talent ass clown. In 2015, the real Michael Bolton appeared in a Funny or Die video in which he was digitally inserted into several scenes from the movie, replacing his namesake character. He repeated the lines verbatim with one exception. He called himself an extremely talented ass clown.
Good for him.
The taller Bob consultant actually wears buckled belts for suspenders. They changed color based on his outfit. Did you notice this?
Yes, I was staring at them for like minutes when I was rewatching this. I was like, are those belts?
This is McGinley's character. I noticed it too, and I was like, what the fuck? Is that a braided belt? Why is he wearing braided belts? It looks so weird.
Belts.
Remember those? Also, maybe
hell yeah.
What's the most 1999?
Oh man, I want to get into that again.
In 2016 South Carolina Republican presidential primary campaign, Ted Cruz thought this movie was so iconic and recognizable that one of his ads was a parody of it.
Oh, come on.
Fellow Texan.
What are you doing to me right now?
Well, I'm saying you and Mike Judge and Ted Cruz all have something in common. Peter mentions that he and presumably the other programmers are working on fixing the year 2000 problem in Inditex's banking software. This issue, often referred to as Y2K or the Millennium Bug, was a real problem dealt with by many companies in the late 1990s. Peter accurately describes the issue as being related to a space-saving shortcut used by programmers where the year portion of date-related data was stored as 2 digits, 75 instead of 1975. The expectation was that software written in such a way would fail, perhaps catastrophically, when the year changed from 1999 to 2000. However, largely thanks to a massive effort on the part of the software and financial industries, most of the issues were resolved before the deadline, and the millennium change occurred with few issues. This is sort of the crux of the movie.
Yeah.
And I didn't mention it in What's Age the Worst, and I probably should have.
Yeah.
But just Millennium Y2K panic, and what we thought this would do to us is bizarre.
Yeah.
That was a huge concern. Andrew, I recognize you were 10. I don't know how much anxiety you were carrying to school every day.
I think I was like internalizing it from like the news or my parents. Because I do remember New Year's Eve 99, I was in Toronto. And like there was this like certain worry. It was like, what's gonna happen?
Yeah.
Yeah,
and
there was real
happened.
angst. No, nothing happened. I was pretty drunk, as I recall.
Yeah, I only remember it through like the sort of teenage lens of like the like the Willennium, like like that like sort of culture, like people try to make like fun out of it and stuff like that.
You were super into Millennium, weren't you?
I was.
You're a big Will Smith guy.
I am.
The abbreviation TPS, as referenced in the infamous TPS report, is undefined in the final cut of the film. TPS is used in the software industry to stand for Test Procedure Specification.
Hell yeah.
Ajay Naidu improvised the moment when he breakdances in Peter's apartment since he had been breakdancing with friends in his downtime while shooting the film.
That's awesome.
Paul Wilson ad-libbed the Naga, not gonna work here anymore line.
Yeah.
So good.
Incredible. Some of the best lines here improvised. The breakdancing thing was alarming. I was like, wow, that actually is the actor. He just busted that out.
Yeah. That wasn't a stunt double. That
Not
was
a stunt
real.
double. As I mentioned, Mike Judge hated the marketing campaign for the film. Milton reveals his intentions to burn down the building 19 minutes into the movie. During his and Peter's phone conversation, as Peter is trying to clean up his desk to leave, Milton tells him that if they take my stapler, I'll set the building on fire. Anybody catch that Easter egg?
Yeah, I've noticed it before that this sort of thing is set up from the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
Mike Judge said after the film came out, although it was not a box office success, he received compliments from many celebrities who enjoyed the film. Jim Carrey invited Judge to his house, and Chris Rock left, quote, the best voicemail ever.
That's awesome.
Madonna also took him to dinner. Let's try to imagine Mike Judge and Madonna having dinner together for a second. What are they talking about? Also, Madonna, who became famous at 19, has almost certainly never even been into an office.
Yeah.
What was it about this movie that she related to?
That's gotta just speak to, like, I guess just the fact that in doing research of this, I read some think piece that was basically like, here's the problem with the ending. And it was basically like that sort of the unhappiness with the workplace isn't exclusive to an office environment, that it's like speaks to a larger thing, blah, blah, blah. So I guess it sort of speaks to the fact that she's got her own like Lumberg in her life, you know? I don't know. I'm just really theorizing here, guys.
Stay tuned for my forthcoming podcast, The Lumberg in My Life. Should we do Apex Mountain?
Yeah.
Andrew, who do you think this is Apex Mountain for?
I think it is for Ron Livingston. I don't know if that's
Ron
a
Livingston,
hot take or not.
Well, I think there are some potential other candidates. I think it's great work by Livingston.
Yeah.
Jason?
I mean, can I say Mike Judge again?
I wrote down Mike Judge.
I think at that, again, it was at a point where Beavis and Butthead, was it over? It was over, right?
I believe so.
Do America had come out, and then King of the Hill was like a couple seasons in, and then you come out with this, and it's just like, oh my God, this guy just can't lose at this point. And so I think Judge is the answer.
This movie being a huge flop kind of complicates this category in some ways, because Apex Mountain is about sort of the power that you could wield because of the success of the thing that you've done. You know, Ron Livingston is one of the stars of like The Conjuring. You know, he's been in some big stuff.
Yeah.
But in terms of being the centerpiece star of a movie, this is probably as close as he gets.
Yeah, for sure.
And Judge, you know, he does go on to direct other films that did better at the box office, even though I don't think he's ever really had a hit movie. King of the Hill is right on the precipice of creation at this point, I think. Mm-hmm. And that show ran for many years on Fox.
Yep.
And of course, Silicon Valley, one of the most beloved shows of its generation, probably. It's a tough one. I guess I would go Mike Judge, though I will accept Ron Livingston. Gary Cole, any votes for Gary Cole?
I mean, maybe. I think he's hilarious in Veep. And then also in Talladega Nights, but this is definitely the most memorable thing he's done, I think.
I've got 10 names written down for the Joey Pants Award.
That makes a lot of sense. That's why this movie rules.
It's pretty amazing. I want to hear your nominations, though. Andrew, who's your Joey Pants nominee?
My nomination is Orlando Jones.
Oh my gosh, I didn't even write him down, but it's a great one.
Yeah.
The Make 7 Up Yours guy who
Yes.
plays the magazine salesman and
Yes.
explains to them that he actually doesn't know how to launder money. It's like a 10-second roll, but you're like, oh, that's Orlando Jones. Okay.
Also a Mad TV cast member at the time with David Herman. What about you, Jason?
I had written down Orlando Jones.
What? Yeah, there we go.
Because I just vividly remember the 7-Up commercials. And then when I went back and watched it, I was like, oh my God, it's a 7-Up guy. And then I had to Google his name, and it was Orlando Jones.
So we've talked a lot about Gary Cole. I
Yeah.
feel like he has to be on the list. Richard Riel, who plays Smikowski,
Mm-hmm.
who's really funny and has been in a lot of
He's really,
comedies
really
over the
funny.
years. Stephen Root, I think maybe with Barry, people finally know who that is.
I know who that is.
Yeah, but you're as we said, you're an improv king.
That's true. I am an improv king.
David Herman, I don't know what David Herman is doing with his career right now, but he in some ways is and was and always will be a Joey Pants.
Yes.
Diedrich Bader, who I suppose was a star of the Drew Carey show at the time.
And Whose Line?
And then went on to Whose Line Is It Anyway?
Also Veep.
Also Veep, that's right.
It's crazy.
John C. McGinley, this is pre-Scrubs. It's not pre all the movies he was in, including Point Break, but John McGinley is on the line there, I think.
Yeah.
Joe Bays as Dom Portwood, he's the other guy.
Yeah.
And the other manager in The Office who comes in behind Lumbergh.
That's a good one.
And Alexandra Wentworth is Anne, the cheating girlfriend. Do you guys know who Alexandra Wentworth is married to?
Who?
Andrew?
I don't.
George Stephanopoulos.
Wow.
Power couple.
There you go.
So you guys are both going with Orlando Jones for
I'm
this.
going with Orlando 7-Up Jones.
Okay. It's Gary Cole. That's the answer. The Saul Rubinek Award for overacting.
Yeah.
I'm not Chris Ryan, so I can't do. I treated you like a son and you stabbed me in the heart. But just imagine Chris is here and saying that as loud as he can.
Is that the reference?
It's from True Romance.
Right.
It's what Saul Rubinek says to Christian Slater's character. No, it's he says it to actually Balky from Perfect Strangers.
Right.
This is an incredibly strange podcast we're making. I've written down a couple of people. I wrote down McGinley, who I don't think is necessarily overacting in the traditional hamming it up sense.
Yeah.
But because of those line readings I mentioned, I've certainly got Greg Pitts down here as Drew. Mike McShane as Dr. Swanson, who we've not talked about at all, the hypnotist who suffers a heart attack. That heart attack is quite spirited.
Yes.
That's the one I wrote down.
Did you?
That's my answer.
Okay. That's great. And then I wrote down Orlando Jones here. Let's go Mike McShane. You got another one?
I've got Smikowski. His whole when they ask what he does, and then he's just like, what do you like he just like loses his mind. That's
I'm good with people.
Yeah, I have people skills. What the hell is do you want from me? Like that whole bit, like that's great. That's overacting at its finest.
I've got 4 full pages of best quote, and I don't really know what to do with it. We could just say the quotes to one another.
Sure.
I don't know what's the most productive way to do this. Andrew, what's first on your list for best quote?
Yeah, hi.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's, I mean, and especially when it's on the answering machine and he's just scrolling through the yeah highs.
Yeah, hi, it's Bill Lumbergh. It's about 10 o'clock. Yeah, just wondering where you are.
That's iconic.
Hey, Peter, we're starting at the normal hours today.
How's it going?
So everything Lumbergh says has got to be up there.
Yeah.
I love Samir's, why does it say paper jam when there is no paper jam?
That's really good.
Samir's line reading is also very strong. There are a lot of exchanges here that are iconic as well. There's nothing wrong with that name. That's what Samir says to Michael Bolton early in the film. And then Michael says, there was nothing wrong with that name until I was about 12 years old and that no-talent ass clown became famous and started winning Grammys. And Samir says, well, why don't you just go by Mike instead of Michael? And Michael says, no way, why should I change? He's the one who sucks.
Yeah. Yeah.
Great stuff. Craig, our producer, nominated Sounds Like Somebody's Got a Case of the Mondays.
That's really good.
As the all-time iconic line, which crops up, I think, twice within the span of 3 minutes at the top of the film.
When thinking about this category, I was thinking about stuff that I quoted, I guess, or that I said a lot, and that's just that as memorable as that line is, and as iconic as that line is, it's just it didn't spark joy with me.
Hasn't resonated with you because for the Ringer, it's more like a case of the Sundays, the way that we do things here editorially.
Friday nights.
Yeah.
I would say that Lawrence's response to that is one of my favorite lines. And he says,
what does he say?
What would you say if someone said it sounds like you can? And he's just like, no. Shit, man. No. I believe you get your ass kicked for saying something like that.
Yeah. I've got a lot of Lawrence for my line.
I'll pitch one Lawrence here that I really like, particularly when Peter asks, what would you do if you had $1 million? And he says, I'll tell you what I'd do, man. 2 chicks at the same time, man.
At the same time. The thing that I took from Lawrence, do you have more Lawrence?
I want you to share some.
So the thing that I took from Lawrence was It wasn't just the line; it was the way he said the line, and it was fucking A. Growing up, I grew up in Texas. We said fucking A like that all the time, like all the time. It was multiple times a day, and so I think for me personally, it's fucking A.
I like that one.
Yeah.
I'm going to throw another Bob Slidell at you.
Okay.
I'll be honest with you. I love his music. I do. I'm a Michael Bolton fan. For my money, I don't know if it gets any better than when he sings When a Man Loves a Woman.
Yeah.
I fucking love McGinley.
I celebrate the guy's entire catalog.
So good. That's really funny.
So Stan, the Tchotchkes manager, who is played surreptitiously by Mike Judge, we need to talk about your flair. I think that's a very notable one. And then Joanna says, really? I have 15 pieces on. I also, and then Stan says, well, okay, 15 is the minimum, okay? And Joanna says, okay. He says, now, it's up to you whether or not you want to just do the bare minimum or, well, like Brian, for example, has 37 pieces of flair, okay? And a terrific smile. Joanna says, okay, so you want me to wear more? And Stan says, look, Joanna, people can get a cheeseburger anywhere, okay? They can come to Tchotchkes for the atmosphere and the attitude, okay? That's what the flair is about. It's about fun. Look, we want you to express yourself. Now, if you feel that the bare minimum is enough, then okay. But some people choose to wear more, and we encourage that, okay? You do want to express yourself, don't you? There's a lot of rhetorical question mark okays there.
Yeah.
That is a very specific management style.
Managerial style. Yeah.
Which is just one of those things where like Mike Judge has that incredible ear for the way that fucking assholes talk to you. That is just
that passive aggressive.
It's amazing.
Sort of, I'm going to turn this on you. It's awful when it happens to you.
So it's brilliantly resonant. What else? Any other quotes here that you guys want to cite?
There's one when Peter and Joanna are having the fight in the car when she's being like, you're literally just a criminal. Yeah. And he's criticizing her job. And then he pulls something out that is just like the perfect idiot boyfriend just escalating the fight to 1,000. And he says, the Nazis had pieces of flair that they made the Jews wear. And she's just like, what? That line makes me laugh so hard.
The Nazis had pieces of flair that they made the Jews wear.
What?
Oh.
That is a tough one.
That's really good. This was something I never remembered watching as a teenager, but then on the rewatch I did on Saturday, it mentioned shrimp poppers, and that just sounds like the grossest thing ever. And I'm obviously made up for Tchotchkes. That's just great. I don't know. That's just great writing.
Part of it is that he asked those guys if he wants any of that stuff at 10 o'clock in the morning when they're having a cup of coffee. Just disgusting. I think we got to say, I'm thinking I might take that new chick from Logistics. If things go well, I might be showing her my O face.
Yeah, that's in there.
That's got to be on the list.
Yeah.
A low-key one that I love is, what am I going to do with 40 subscriptions to Vibe after Orlando Jones smokes out?
That's so good.
That's a really good one. Any other final nominees for best quote?
I think the whole hypnotherapist speech that he gives should count as a line.
Every day is the worst day of my life.
Every day is the worst day of my life is really, really strong.
And the response? Just, that's messed up.
Dr. Swanson. What's your vote here, Andrew? What's your favorite line from the movie?
I'm going to go, I celebrate the guy's entire catalog.
That's good. That's a great choice. Jason?
I'm gonna go two chicks at the same time. Okay. I think that's really funny.
What would you do if you had $1 million?
I'll tell you what I'd do, man. Two chicks at the same time, man.
It surprised me, and it's funny.
I'm gonna go with, what would you say you do here? Could this work as a 10-episode Netflix show in 2019?
Yes.
Andrew?
My answer to this is yes, because The Office exists.
Yeah.
And obviously it's a little different. Probably there's a little more heart to it, but it's generally sort of a similar setup. And they pull it off.
How much I loved that first 10 minutes. I was just like, if there was no plot to this movie, I'd be okay. As we've talked about, like, it's hard to even recall the plot in certain points, and I think that just sort of speaks to how much I could just watch these people just live their lives and encounter, like what does it look like, when it's busy there, there's so much more I would want to explore. I would love to, I would love to spend time with these people for that long.
This is a good segue to unanswerable questions.
Okay.
Do you think that the TV series UK and US The Office would exist without the movie Office Space?
Yes. But I mean, that's really hard. Well, actually, I'm going to change it. I'm going to say no. I think that I try to think about comedies like this that came out before 1999. It's really hard to peg it. It's really hard to find a voice as strong as this. And I'm just not sure that people would even entertain it without something coming before it. Does that make any sense?
It does. Andrew, what do you think?
I guess I agree with that. It's hard to say, but I think this movie does tap into this sort of like growing malaise with professional livelihood, and both of the offices sort of build on that, and I think draw on the like normalness and just like the banality of normalness that the Office Space gets at entirely.
Yeah, and I feel like this movie not being a big hit indicates also that, and The Office is very different. Tonally, it's very different, but the core ideas of it, it has the word office in it, are so resonant. And the movie was considered such like a hidden gem right after it. It became a cult classic as soon as it hit DVD.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that Ricky Gervais, this comes almost exactly 2 years, The Office does in the UK after this movie comes out. And that feels like the right amount of germinating time too, to sense the influence of something like this.
For sure. Everything Andrew said about just sort of like normal life being funny. It's hard not to put yourself in a setting that would be outside of what would be considered normal, or to the degree of like pushing the limits comedy. I feel like that's where it was going when you talked about Austin Powers, or sort of this sort of like unimaginable thing happening. It takes you out of real world, or like frat comedy essentially. And this highlighting that like real life can be pretty funny.
I agree. Other unanswerable questions. Would they have gotten away with it if Michael Bolton didn't screw up?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Andrew, yes?
Yeah, I think so. I think like the fact that it takes them like a week to even realize that they lost $300,000 is proof that if it happened over a 5-year span, they wouldn't have even seen it.
It also makes, because they clearly do get away with it, obviously, or I guess Stephen Root's character, or I guess Milton ends up with the money, or that's what's implied. And I sort of wonder though, are they still not on the hook for it? And how does it come? Like their problem still exists. I guess this is a little bit of pick and nits. Like the problem still exists. The company should still notice that amount of money is gone, and would be able to trace it to a bank account that Peter opened. You know what I mean? Like that still exists in the world. And so if they truly still got away with it, then yeah, I'm going to go ahead and say that the plan would have worked.
Yeah, I think maybe we should have said what's aged the worst is the idea of companies not being aware of these vast sums of money being siphoned from their archives, and also the idea of not having a digital record of your bank statements, because a building burning down doesn't mean you don't know where money goes. The money isn't stored in the building.
That's my point.
bit of a plot hole there. Let's just do who won the movie. This is our last category. Andrew, who do you say wins the movie?
I mean, you could argue that Milton wins the movie.
Wow. Flex.
I mean,
why do you say that?
So, I mean, he's the one who ends up on a beach at the end sipping Mai Tais with traveler's checks, just like making it rain traveler's checks.
That's true.
So
That's true.
I mean, in some ways he comes out on top.
The legacy of Milton.
Yeah, I support that. I mean, Yeah, he was the guy who's getting trampled on his old. I mean, I guess he still kind of is getting trampled on. That's the takeaway.
That's why I don't think he won.
That
He's
wherever
still being
he
ignored by a waiter
on the beach. And so I guess that's the only case against it.
Who do you say, Jason?
I'm going to give the boring answer.
Mike Judge.
Yeah,
it's got to be Mike Judge.
It's Mike Judge, and he deservingly so.
He proves that he is also a great comedy director of human beings.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Which is a big, like, as I said before, was a big deal. My parents were people that just didn't want to entertain cartoons in that way or engage with them. And so for him to be able to resonate with an audience like that. And I think he because of this movie, it changed a lot of things, as we've discussed with The Office. I still believe that it had a decent like cultural impact in terms of workplace and what workplaces wanted to be perceived as moving forward. We talk about Suits and stuff like in reading the oral history, he was just so insistent on a specific vision, authenticity, blandness, all of that stuff. The right actors, not necessarily wanting Matt Damon or Ben Affleck or whoever it was. He did it his way, and we're still talking about it.
Yeah, we really did this our way. I hope this has not been too much of an HR violation. Any final lasting thoughts on Office Space?
Yeah, I love The Ringer, and
it's too late.
My
We're
job is
cutting this,
great.
Jason. Nice try. Nice try. Andrew, anything from you? The last chance to suck up. Don't do it.
No, I'm good.
Oh, well done. Thank you very much. This has been The Rewatchables 1999, brought to you by Luminary Media. Stay tuned to this feed. We will be back next week. I believe, I can't say for certain, I believe, with Eyes Wide Shut, featuring Bill Simmons, Chris Ryan, Mallory Rubin, and myself. Speaking of HR violations, tune in then.